Welcome to Global Forum for Teacher Educators. We are human rights educators. Global Forum for Teacher Educators. La 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 la. We are human rights educators. Global Forum for Teacher Educators. La 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 la. We are human rights educators. Global Forum for Teacher Educators. La 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 la.
Hello, everyone. As you understand, today I'm going to be talking about climate literacy and its significance for learners. I'm going to introduce myself briefly. I'll make that relatively quick because some of you might have heard from me before. And then the actual talk is on climate literacy. I do a short introduction, look at the really significant areas, the areas that are really significant for learners in terms of climate literacy, some challenges and opportunities, and then I will conclude. Also, around about the middle of the talk, I'm going to show an example of community action in the democratic Republic of the Congo, which just gives a different illustration on how community action can work, as opposed to very large scale changes in education. I'll very quickly introduce myself. I started teaching geography, economics, and geology. I was a principal examiner for geography. That meant I produced the examinations in Scotland for 10 years. And then I was the head of a high school in Scotland for 23 years. And I've written quite a lot of textbooks, and many of them some years ago, and I've taken back to writing more in, I pressed the button too hard. In retirement, I've returned to writing books, and that's just a small selection of the ones that I've written. Obviously, one of the early ones is on the atmosphere and climate change. I also curate some social media. And on my website, I also have a lot of free resources for geography teachers in the main, but there are other things on there as well. I tried to produce a whole range of things which are free to use. There's also a Substack button on my website, which takes you into all of the free articles that I write, mostly on geography and environmental issues, but I have done a number on some leadership issues as well, and they are all free to read on the Substack platform. On to the topic today, climate literacy. As by way of an introduction, in an era where the impacts of climate change are increasingly evident, climate literacy has emerged as a critical component of education. Climate literacy it refers to an understanding of the climate system, the scientific principles that underpin it, the way human activities influence climate, and of course the potential consequences of climate change. Now, for all learners of all ages, climate literacy is not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about fostering the skills, the values, and behaviours necessary to respond to one of the most pressing global challenges of our time. Now, this talk really is exploring the significance of climate literacy for learners and highlights its role in shaping a sustainable future. Climate literacy is a crucial aspect of understanding and addressing climate change, encompassing knowledge about the Earth's climate system, the impacts of climate change, strategies for adaptation and mitigation where possible, and involves an understanding of scientific principles and makes us able to assess whether information is credible, hopefully communicating effectively about climate issues and making informed decisions that consider environmental impacts. I want to flip back just for a moment to highlight something I was involved in 1990. I was involved in writing a geography curriculum for the senior school, and that was about coming up with a course which would be examined with our higher grade examination. That's our senior school exam, a bit like A-levels in England. And in 1990, I pushed to have 2 words added to the study of the atmosphere, and that was climate change. Just 2 words. But that was a start of being able to influence how climate change was taught in schools. So in 1991, students started studying higher geography in 5th and 6th year at school, in the secondary school, and I wrote the first examinations, which had a question on climate change in 1991. And then also in 1991, I wrote a textbook, which, this is the textbook here, now a bit tattered, on physical geography, which was half the course, and a quarter of this book was on the atmosphere. And on that chapter in the atmosphere, there were 18 pages on climate change, and the illustration shows 6 of those pages, gives you an idea, smattering of the things that I covered in that. So, from 2 words in the curriculum, then to having questions on climate change in an examination, then moving on to textbooks which teachers then bought to teach the subject to pupils, it moved things in the direction of teachers teaching more and more about climate change, and it's still there in the syllabus 30 years later. And also, while I was the head teacher, I developed a lot of interdisciplinary work in my school. So it wasn't just geography teachers looking at climate change, it was mathematics teachers and English teachers and a variety of others. So that's just how 2 words can actually start a big change. So we now have people who are nearly 50 years of age in Scotland who were taught, starting in 1991, about climate change in geography, and it's permeated other areas of the curriculum since then. So we're building up really a population that has some knowledge and some understanding of climate change. So that was that illustration. I want to go back to the talk and look at the significance for learners. And I've looked at 4 things I'm going to cover. Basically, understanding the science behind climate change, developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills, fostering environmental stewardship and global citizenship, and empowering social and political engagement. And in those last 2 areas, that's how I want to introduce another example of how you can change the direction of understanding about climate change at a local level. So, first of all, understanding the science behind climate change. At its core, climate literacy involves a deep understanding of the scientific principles that explain climate change. This includes knowledge of the greenhouse effect, the carbon cycle, the role of human activities such as fossil fuel combustion, deforestation, in driving global warming. And for learners, they need to grasp these concepts. It's essential because it provides the foundation for understanding how and why climate change occurs. In terms of scientific literacy, a strong grounding in climate science helps learners to critically evaluate information related to climate change. In an area of widespread misinformation, being able to discern scientifically accurate information, they need to understand the myths from the misconceptions, and that is crucial. And this skill is particularly important as climate change continues to be, in some parts of the world, more highly debated in public and political spheres, though hopefully that is becoming less of a challenge. And I wish it were so all over the world, but it doesn't appear to be. And then in terms of informed decision making, I mean, understanding the science behind climate change empowers the learner to make those informed decisions about their personal life, such as choosing sustainable products, reducing energy consumption, or supporting policies aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It helps people to understand the relationship between climate and human activities, allowing them to contribute meaningfully to broader societal debates about climate action. They'll be armed with the factual and science-based knowledge that is so important. The second aspect of the significance to learners is developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Now, climate change is complex. It's a complex, very multifaceted problem that requires us to have innovative and adaptive solutions. Climate literacy encourages the development of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. by challenging learners to engage with the complexities of climate science, but also the socio-economic impacts of that change, and then also to consider the ethical considerations involved in climate action. Climate literacy, it involves understanding the interconnections between different systems, ecological, the social, and the economic. Learners who are climate literate are better equipped to think systematically, recognizing that changes in one part of the system can have far-reaching effects elsewhere. And this approach fosters a holistic understanding. Um, I see a number of people have joined from around the world, and I'm sure that you're all aware that in different countries there are different considerations. Many of the countries I can see here have been suffering huge changes to their weather systems. Um, People in southern Europe have had, really quite a hot summer, really record-breaking temperatures all the way through the summer. Unfortunately, in Scotland, it's been a bit cooler and wetter, but I know many parts of the world have suffered because of the really, really hot temperatures. And I'm sure that in many of these countries, people realise that yes, it is time that we educated people so they can do something about it. And we want our young people to think creatively. And it is crucial if they're going to think about how we can mitigate and adapt to climate change. One of the other aspects, we need to foster environmental stewardship and global citizenship. Now, there are various aspects to this. Climate literacy extends beyond the scientific understanding to encompass values and ethics. It encourages us to have a sense of responsibility for the environment, a commitment to sustainable living. And for this, for learners, it means not just understanding the impacts, but also they need to be empowered to take action. Climate literate individuals are more likely to engage in behaviours that protect the environment, such as conserving energy, reducing waste, advocating for conservation efforts. Education that promotes climate literacy can instill a lifelong commitment to environmental stewardship. Education that promotes climate literacy really can contribute towards a healthier planet. Climate change is a global issue. It transcends national borders. It requires cooperation and collaboration across countries and cultures. And climate literacy should promote that sense of global citizenship, where learners can recognise that their role in the global community, and they also understand the importance of working together, both in their communities, but also wider afield, in order to build that more sustainable and just world. Understanding climate science helps learners to comprehend the economic, social, and environmental challenges posed by climate change, enabling them really to have an impact on these issues in their personal and in their professional lives. The fourth aspect really is empowering social and political engagement, and I'm going to introduce another example of how in one part of the world they're doing things locally. Now, climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's a social and political one, and addressing it requires policy changes, social movements, shifts in public opinion, and you can do that on a large scale or you can do that on a local scale. Educating young people about climate change fosters environmentally conscious attitudes and behaviours, and it helps them to adapt to the changes and trends, and enables us to help create sustainable communities. I want to look at one example. The short word FADPE, it represents a project that was running in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, until around about 2022. Unfortunately, their website is no longer active. But it's looking at addressing environmental education, awareness of environmental education. It's looking at World Earth Days, Water Days, Environment Days. It was about educating children, but also educating the community, helping them to be more sustainable. And the little illustrations that are here, not just with the children working on the climate change, they were looking at the globe and where there are climate change stresses, as there are in their own country, but also they're looking at how they can actually have an impact in their community. And they've developed in these villages nurseries to grow crops from small seedlings, which they can then transplant. And then even with the area shown under a net is actually tree seedlings that they're growing so they can start reforestation, realizing that removal of the forest in the area has had a detrimental effect on their environment, and they're doing all of that as well. So, in a sense, this is a very local approach to doing it. I'm just going to show one more slide on this. It illustrates the general objective. They were encouraging locals to eat more vegetarian or vegan approaches, but obviously they can do that by producing better crops, and they can also do this by educating the entire community. As you can see, it's not just the children in school that are learning about the environment, it's also the villagers are shown how they can combat the impacts of climate change, the degradation to their environment, and also how it can give them a more sustainable future and give them a better way of life, a healthier way of life. They had a whole range of general and specific objectives. I put those up here. So they're not all to do with climate change, but a lot of it is about the impact that climate change has had on their community and how they as a community can get help to improve their lives. So we don't always need to think of things as being very, very large scale, although these community efforts are very, very impactful and they last for generations. I'll go back on to finish the rest of my presentation, but I thought it's important to have an illustration of a community approach. And if I click back onto this, there's actually an annual report which was produced in 2022 at the conclusion of this project, which I put a link to a PDF, which goes into quite a lot of detail about what they were actually doing in this part of the DRC. And you can access this if you get access to my slides, which I'll make available to the Global Forum for Teacher Educators, and they can make that available to you. Or indeed, I can put it onto my website and you can get it there and download it for free as well. So you can have access to all of this information, which you can peruse at your own leisure. Oops. Right. Before I go on to challenges and opportunities, I think I wanted to cover the fact that nowadays, of course, the global economy is shifting towards sustainability, and climate literacy is becoming a skill in the workforce. In the developed world, many industries from energy to agriculture to finance and technology are being transformed by the need to address climate change. And for learners, climate literacy opens up a range of career opportunities now that weren't there. a decade or 2 decades ago. So climate literacy is preparing learners for a future, a series of future careers in green industries. It equips them with the skills and understanding needed for those roles. And it also shows the importance of focusing on sustainability and climate change mitigation. So as I said, sustainable careers. As businesses and governments prioritise sustainability, there's growing demand for professionals with expertise in these climate-related fields, because we know that climate-related climate literate learners are better prepared to pursue these careers, better prepared to assist their communities, integrating sustainability principles into their fields. And climate literacy encourages a mindset of lifelong learning, as the science of climate change and the social political landscape that we live in is constantly changing. So adaptability is crucial for navigating this constantly changing world, the changing job market, the changing environment, and the challenges which certainly over the last few years, in terms of living in a hotter world, are becoming ever more evident. I said there are challenges and opportunities. There are implementation gaps. I mean, not all parts of the world spend a lot of time teaching climate education of any sort. Many educational systems fail to incorporate climate topics adequately. And you can include many developed countries as many less developed countries. This is not something that is unique to any sphere. Media and technology. Some media platforms can be helpful, and Netflix and Sky News have actually produced many more content hours related to climate and environmental issues, and they obviously reach a broader audience. But again, not all media and technology promoters are able to do this or willing to do it. Future prospects: as climate change and technology evolve, climate literacy will continue to be an essential component of education, preparing future generations for the ongoing and future challenges posed by the climate change that we're all facing. Now, in conclusion, climate literacy is not just an educational goal, but it's a necessity for preparing learners to navigate and respond to the challenges of the 21st century, equipping learners with the knowledge, skills, values to understand and address climate change. It empowers them to take informed action. It fosters a sense of global responsibility and prepares the next generation for the opportunities and the challenges that they are going to face in a world which is changed by a changing climate. Despite the importance of climate literacy, as I said, many countries are failing to integrate it fully into their education systems. And really, sometimes local action groups and informal education have been better at motivating communities to take action and to understand the need for sustainable living, as the illustration I showed earlier. So climate change is an essential component of education. It equips learners with the knowledge and skills to understand climate change. It involves understanding of the principles of the Earth's climate system, and it helps us all to make informed decisions that are affected by the climate. Now, what I've done is I have produced this in an article which you can access through my Substack platform free. So it covers the main points of this talk. And my website's there. You can get a hold of a lot of my free resources from there. And there are also a whole range of references that I've used in terms of this talk, which you might find useful. These are both on the presentation, but they're also on the Substack article. So if you've missed any of them, you can get them either through access to this set of slides or through going direct to the Substack platform and searching for Richie Cunningham, and you'll find it as the most recent article on climate literacy and its significance for learners. So you've got all of that information to hand, and hopefully you'll find that useful. Now, I will email the Global Forum for Teachers, and I will indicate, I will send them a copy of the article and a copy of my presentation slides. So they may wish to make them available to you, and certainly I'll put them on my own website so you can get access to them as well just by clicking a button. So I hope you found that useful. I think really, I've got a question here: how can educators change the mentality of students and parents? It's not preaching to students and parents, it's actually showing them the information and showing them how their own environment has changed. And by doing that, you then ask them, what can you do about it? What can you do to change the situation? So it's engaging them rather than telling them. I mean, I could stand in front of a class and tell them X, Y, and Z, and some of them might follow them, some of them might just fall asleep. It's really, you have to bring them in and get them to think of ways of reducing the impacts of climate change. I saw in the example from the DRC in terms of reducing the effects of climate change and improving their environment. They started in some of these villages quite a significant reforestation scheme, and that improves their local environment, but it also has an impact globally as well. I mean, reforestation around the world, instead of chopping down the Amazon that seems to be going on, yeah, all of these can have an impact. And I think really what you want to do in terms of showing young people about reducing the impacts of climate change, mitigation is probably going to be the most important topic for the next decade. We cannot stop climate change. Those of us that are going to live through the next decade are going to suffer worse weather. We're going to have more occasions when things dramatically change. And I think the only way that we're going to deal with this is to point out the ways that perhaps we can mitigate climate change in particular areas, whether it be in terms of the urban environment and how that can be changed, because cities tend to heat up a lot more than rural areas, and it makes it very difficult to live in cities. And integrating climate literacy into the curriculum. Speaking as a former head teacher in charge of a large secondary school, I would say a good way to do that is when the children are younger in the school, maybe 12, 13, 14, that if you can get departments to work together to cover topics such as climate change and show how they can all make a contribution and they can all help towards the understanding of it, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So it's not just their geography teacher talking to them, it's their maths teacher, their home economics teacher, their science teacher, their English teacher, whichever it happens to be. All of these things help. I mean, I can see from some of the things, a lot of unusual heat, droughts, fires all over the world. I mean, certainly Southern Europe has had a dreadful time, in some parts of the United States, despite the fact that many people don't believe in climate change. There have had some incredible heat waves as well, and lots of forest fires. So yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to get rid of it. We're stuck with this for the next decade and more, because it's going to take time for any solutions to have an impact. So we have to get used to it, and we have to adapt in the short term. And we then have to use that pressure on our politicians and others to make sure that they actually do go for a greener environment. We use greener energy, and we stop burning fossil fuels. Yeah. Yes, and we've actually had a number of people from Southern Europe come to Scotland because we've had a very cool and very wet summer, of which we still get quite a few of. But climate change, when you look at a lot of the models, when it's saying that southern England and a lot of Europe would get much hotter temperatures, a lot of the early models, even in 1990, were suggesting that Scotland would be wetter, windier, and cool. And that's generally what we experience here. So people are coming here. We have bumped into tourists from Germany who've come prepared for the wet weather in Scotland because they just wanted to get away from the heat in southern Germany. So, yeah, climate change has different impacts in different parts of the world. Happy to answer any more questions, but I will put onto my website these talks. I'll put them in the senior students resources section on my resources page. They're not there at the moment, but if you go into the resources page in a day or so, you can get access to those resources and just look for the senior people. In fact, I don't know if I can. Yeah, it's basically www.richiecunningham.com, and then you go into the resources tab, and it's I think here we are. I will put it on this button here. It says Senior Secondary Geography. So press that button, you go in there, and I'll put the presentation on there and a direct link to the article so you can see them. And I hope that's useful for you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today. And Dr. Munir Mosaf, thank you so much for allowing us to share this around the world. I think you're doing a tremendous job making these talks available to those who want to listen to them and those who want to gather information. So it's a very, very useful service that you provide. And I hope you'll get many more people who wish to contribute to the work that you're doing.